it's Mo. It is October, and that means it is Occult Detective October. And I was trying to think of some books that I could read this month that were occult detective books, and it got me thinking, have I ever even read an occult detective book? I know I have, but which ones are occult detective books? You can see more about occult detectives on Roy Reads Anything's channel or Criminali's channel or a bunch of other people, but I will leave some of those announcement videos listed down below. So first off, I wanted to look at the definition of occult. The definition of occult is supernatural, mystical, or magical beliefs, practices, or phenomenon. That to me is a wide range of things and can be seen through multiple lenses, because something that Western people might call mystical, like Chinese mystics or something like that, might be spiritual, might be religious. So it might not be mystical, magical, or supernatural, but there are also a lot of supernatural elements in real religions. So I think saying occult doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't also real things, religious things, different aspects of real religions or spiritualities, right? I also looked up, wait, where did it go? I also looked up occult detective to see if there was a definition for that, but it was really more occult detective fiction, which Wikipedia describes as a subgenre of detective fiction that combines the tropes of the main genre with those of supernatural fantasy and or horror fiction. So again, the occult detective can be employed in cases involving ghosts, demons, curses, magic, vampire, undead, monsters, or other supernatural elements. Some occult detectives are portrayed as being psychic or in possession of supernatural powers themselves. So we have some obvious ones that I've read and some less obvious ones that I've read. So let's go through them and talk about some of the occult detective fiction that I have already read. The first one that comes to mind, and I think one of the more obvious ones, is Hellboy and BPRD. That is the Bureau of Paranormal Detection. So in Mike Mignola's Hellboy and BPRD, we see actual detectives, people who are employed as detectives with skills of detection, but also with occult skills and paranormal skills, researching, detecting, investigating paranormal and supernatural elements. These are definitely true occult detective books in the most sense of the word, because we have detectives who are of the occult, we have investigations that are of the occult, and they are very specifically designed for that. I think you could also count Constantine from the DC universe, that's DC, right, as a occult detective, because he also has supernatural abilities and also investigates supernatural things. We can also use the example of Dracula. Definitely Van Helsing is an occult detective. He is a detective, someone that people call out to detect and investigate occult phenomenon and paranormal phenomenon. So definitely Dracula has an occult detective, although maybe it's not entirely all about occult detectives. Along the same classic lines, we could say The Horror at Red Hook could be an occult detective book. The original, written by H.P. Lovecraft, is super racist and has as much to do with racism as it does with detecting occult phenomenon, but definitely we have a normal person, a regular person with no superpowers, with no supernatural abilities, stumbling on a occult occurrence. Now, the occult occurrence in Horror at Red Hook, it's unclear whether it's really actually occult things or the occult side of it is used as kind of subterfuge. But in Black Tom, which is a retelling of this story by Victor Lavelle, we don't as much see the detectives. They're not our main concern, but there is more actual supernatural goings on. And I would definitely say it's worth reading both of them to see where the original story comes, but I like The Ballad of Black Tom better, and I think it's a more cohesive novel, and obviously with a lot less overt racism. There is racism in this book, but it is portrayed as a negative thing, whereas H.P. Lovecraft was just really racist. Two more classics that I would put in this category would be The Great God Pan by Arthur Mencken, who was a Welsh author. And this doesn't have a true detective in it necessarily, but it does have scholars and other people who are investigating something of a supernatural element. And then also I would say Arthur Mencken's book, The White People, is also similar themes, and this a little bit more has someone who is searching for someone else, so is detecting, is investigating, looking for someone else. Those are like true classics of the genre. Another one that I would suggest is Through a Glass Darkly, which is a Basil Willing Investigates novel, and this is by Helen McCloy. Helen McCloy is a largely forgotten classic crime writer from the US. She was a contemporary of Mary Roberts Rinehart and Agatha Christie, and she was writing in the US in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I believe. This book was originally published in 1949. Dr. Basil Willing is a genuine doctor and also a detective, and in this book, his girlfriend is upstate doing something and she sees some activity that may or may not be paranormal, and so Dr. Basil Willing investigates that. He comes up to kind of rescue her, but she plays a large part in this as well. I've never read any other Helen McCloy books. I do have a couple, but I loved this book and I loved her writing, and I think this fits well in kind of the classic genre, but this is really one that you are never sure of the supernatural elements, so you have to read it to find out, where the other books that I've talked about definitely do have supernatural elements. Far off from the classics is, of course, Dirk Gently, who is a holistic detective. Dirk Gently first appeared in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams, and then in the sequel, The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul. There's also an excerpt of a potential Dirk Gently novel that was published posthumously in the collection The Salmon of Doubt by Douglas Adams. So Dirk Gently is a holistic detective, and he detects all sorts of different things, but in both these books he runs up against supernatural and occult phenomenon. I like him because he's kind of a bungling everyman spoof of a detective. He's not particularly engaging in a lot of ways, but he is a good detective and uses his holistic methods to solve crimes. Another series of books that fall into the occult detection oeuvre, but doesn't follow an actual detective, would be the Sworn Soldier series by T. Kingfisher. What Moves the Dead is the first book, and then What Feasts at Night is the second book, and our main character in both of these, who is a soldier, end up having to investigate occult and supernatural phenomenon that go on. So they're kind of thrust into this in the first book when they go to visit their friends and find something amiss at their friend's house. Another series that I read recently that are definitely detectives, but not necessarily 100% occult detectives, are the Anna and Din novels, which is the Shadow of the Leviathan series, which starts with The Tainted Cup. So I've read The Tainted Cup and also A Drop of Corruption, which are the two books that are out in this series, and they follow Anna and Din, who are detectives in the world in which they live, detecting kind of weird, mysterious deaths. And there's a lot of political intrigue in these books, and there's a lot of world building and a lot of, not magic, but very different ways of doing things that are not true to our world that can seem magical. And the deaths that Din and Anna investigate in these two books could definitely be of occult leanings. Like I was saying before, culturally, sometimes detectives are detecting ghosts, spirits, but because the religions in which they live and the places that they are from believe those things to be real, to be true, and as Western people, we don't dictate what is true and what's not. So if you're looking for something like that, I would suggest Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. This does have several different perspectives, and one of them is about a detective who is seeking out ghosts and seeking out out different occult and supernatural elements. It's not the main part of the book, but I think it is a part that stuck out to me a lot when reading this book, and culturally I thought it was very interesting to read a book like that. The author is Vietnamese and the story is Vietnamese, so the culture and the heritage of the story is Vietnamese, and we see that intersection of religion and beliefs and occult natures and the detection of both of those things. Similarly, but not a true detective, would be Night Tiger. This is by Yangtze Chu, and she is a Malaysian author, and so this is a Malay story. It's a historical fiction, and it does have someone investigating a occult or supernatural element to the book. Again, it's not the whole perspective of the book, but it does take up quite a chunk of the book and has a lot of cultural, religious, and spiritual elements that would definitely be considered supernatural or occult by Western standards, and there is someone, investigating about them. A true detective, definitely researching, definitely investigating occult items and occult instances, occult phenomenon, is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is an American author, and they write a wide range of very interesting books. In Magic for Liars, our main character is a private eye, an investigator, and in this world, some people have magic and some people don't, and our main character does not. So she is sent to a school for magic where there has been a mysterious death, and she is forced to kind of reconcile with her past as she also investigates this magic occurrence, this supernatural occurrence within the school. And then lastly, and probably most recently, well, I guess my most recently read Occult Detective was in the Sworn Soldier series, but besides that, my most recently read Occult Detective is The Dead Take the A-Train by Cassandra Caw and Richard Kadrey. This is the first in a series or a duology, and it follows a detective. She's a private eye, she's an investigator, and she's also kind of a bounty hunter for occult, paranormal, and magical creatures. This has demons, this has magic, this has occult nature of multiple things, and it's very bloody and gory and gross, and this one is definitely a horror. The Sworn Soldier series would be considered a horror as well. I would say that Magic for Liars is more of a fantasy. We have two fantasy historical fictions. The Dirk Gently series was contemporary at the time, but it would now definitely be historical. Same goes for Through a Glass Darkly. The Ballad of Black Tom is historical, but the story that it was based on was contemporary at the time. Dracula is historical, and it's also an epistolary novel. And then Hellboy, I think, is contemporary. He does travel back in time a lot, but I think he and the BPRD are pretty soundly rooted in the era in which these comics were created, which is like the 90s, 2000s. So a lot of variety, a lot of different kinds of authors, a lot of different kinds of books, but all with a paranormal, supernatural, magical, detection, investigation element. Showing you all these books doesn't really solve my problem of what I might read in October that would fit this bill. So definitely let me know if you've read any books that have occult detection in them, that have occult detectives in them. Let me know some of your favorites. Let me know some of the big holes that I've missed, classics that you would consider occult detective novels. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!